We're on our second video, and last time we talked about using adjectives and superlatives and comparing ideas, contrasting ideas. And you notice that we talked a lot about descriptive words here. And we use descriptive words when we travel, when we're telling stories, we're selling things. So last video, if you just watched it, remember we're going to talk about selling your iPhone or selling your Samsung phone using these descriptive words and adjectives and comparing it to, say, somebody else's phone. And today what we're going to do, in the book it talks about traveling. Now, this is a picture out over here, if you probably saw it already, of my wife and we were in Vienna, and my wife likes classical music. She thinks it's the best. She really loves classical music. And we wanted to go to Vienna, kind of the hometown of a lot of these guys, and see where like Bach and Beethoven and Chopin and all these guys. And she wanted to go to a concert, okay? So you see, we got all dressed up. We went to the palace, and we went to a concert. I think it was a Mozart, kind of where Mozart did a lot of his performing. And to explain this, we have to use descriptive words. Like at first it was real quiet, and the palace was all opulent and amazing. And you know, it wasn't like a concert hall where people were screaming and shouting. Everybody's all dressed up and everybody's fancy. Everybody's sitting there all properly, sipping their tea and drinking their wine, right? So when we travel, we use these descriptive words, okay? So let's take a look at our book again. Remember, they were comparing with adjectives and nouns and adjectives and superlatives. When we travel, that's how we know whether a place is good or bad. We compare food. Like, is the food in Seoul better than the food in Busan? Do we like hamburgers from, say, America, or do we think the hamburgers in England are better? So we use this idea of comparison words. So, for example, when you're traveling, I like to travel a lot. And this little hat, which I happen to have right here, is from Morocco. You can see it's all handmade, very colorful. And it was basically like $1 or $2. And Morocco, as you can see here, is right near Spain and Portugal. And you can just jump right over from Spain right into Morocco there. And it's kind of a cool place. And it's hard to describe it because it's kind of a mixture of cultures. There's a lot of Spanish influence. There's a lot of French influence there. And so, for example, you can see this area here. This is a place called Chefchaouen, which is in Morocco. And the alleys, like the walkways, are super narrow. They're very small. And we have steps here. Some of the steps are tall, some of them are short. So you got to kind of look down a lot because it's an old city that was built up on a mountainside. And you can see that it was painted blue. Everything was blue, light blue, dark blue, mixture of blues. And this is a photo of it right here. It's up in the mountains, and you can see that it's just a giant city that was built over time and very crammed into each other. So if you go into the city, it's mostly walking. There's like no vehicles in the main part of the city there. And you can see it has that blue, right? So if you're going to describe it, for example, the food. There's my wife, and these were these little teeny snails, and she got this whole bowl for like, I don't know, it was like 50 won or like 25 cents from America. You know, here it'd be like 5,000 won for this, but it was very cheap, and she ate them. When you walk through these areas, there's all kinds of shops and different areas you can eat. The bed and breakfast that we stayed at, actually here, we found it through, there's different areas you can stay when you travel, right? There's hostels, which are small little rooms that are shared by many people. There's bed and breakfast, where they get bed and breakfast. You can go through couch surfing. You can do an Airbnb. This was basically found through Airbnb. And right here, I could actually lay down and look out over the city. I played my harmonica. They had a little guitar there. And there was nobody around. It was very quiet and peaceful. Now you notice while I'm describing these, I'm using words like quiet, peaceful, short, tall. We use descriptive words when we're telling stories and when we're talking about travel. Now, the food was awesome. It was all included. They had eggs, and they had paprika, and they had all kind of olives and fresh breads and wine, and they would just keep bringing it up there as much as you could eat. And you notice that the tablecloths there and the chairs, it was very colorful, right? And so when you're talking about traveling, we use these descriptive words. Now, you notice that there was hardly any people. And this was actually in peak season. We had just left from Europe, and we're through Portugal and Spain, and there was just thousands of people everywhere. It was very crowded. It was really nice to be here because it was quiet and peaceful. We could walk through. They had grapevines that were hanging down. There's actually grapes that you could just pick. It was pretty clean, and everything was painted blue. Now, when we traveled, this right here is Marrakesh or Fez, and look at all the people. Most of Morocco was just packed with people, and I don't like a lot of people. I find it uncomfortable. I find it just hot and sweaty, and people are like yelling at you like, my friend, come, come. Everybody's trying to sell you. Everybody's pushing stuff at you. Little kids are running around trying to steal your stuff. But then when we went to Chefchaouen, you can see they had the same kind of markets, not quite as big, but you could buy things in peace. Like you could look at the hats, you could look at the little trinkets. You could actually buy things in peace and quiet. It was awesome, and I highly recommend, if you go to Morocco, this Chefchaouen. It's kind of way up in the mountains. It's not very touristy. We spent most of our time there. It was lots of fun. So, when you're looking at traveling, and in Unit 5, if you look through some of the book here, you'll notice that when you travel, one of the problems of international travel is communication problems, language barriers. You find yourself like using your hands out like, oh, pickle payal. You're like, I'm hungry, food. You know, it's like McDonald's. And they're like, oh, McDonald's. They understand international words, right? Like if you want to find a bathroom, like a toilet, bathroom. They're like, oh, yeah. They understand certain words, but in Morocco, they spoke a lot of French and Spanish. So I was lost, right? So communication problems. So how are you good at languages? Now, I myself am terrible at learning languages. This is an English conversation class built on using English and communicating. So I myself am not very great at languages. Some of you, and a lot of my students that are watching this, I'm talking fast, but most of you are kind of following along. You get most of my words, and you can pretty much understand me. Now, some of you might be lost, but most of my students, when I ask them, do you understand me? They're like, yeah, no problem, teacher. So, are you good at languages? Well, we learned of 3 ways that we actually grade in this class. If you're asking like, hey, what do we grade on? Remember, there's accuracy, fluency, and communication. Now, accuracy here is the ability to speak properly. That is, right, selecting correct words, so that's your vocabulary, and expressions or sayings, right? And you convey them with a meaning, right? And there's grammatical patterns. So accuracy is a lot in writing and in reading, right? So when you're in that area, you definitely want to do that. So we don't do a ton of grammar, but in the unit here that we're doing Unit 1 and Unit 5, you notice we've been focused on a lot of expressive words. And that's kind of the grammar I'm looking at. Not the structure per se, but just communicating your ideas and trying to get across to your partner what you're trying to say. So we call that accuracy. Now, fluency, when I'm grading, there's lots of areas of fluency. Now, some of it is hesitation and repetition, which when you first start speaking a language, right, you're hesitant because your brain is trying to think of words. You're like, hi, teacher, I went to, thinking, your brain's like, I went to Seoul and I went to a museum, and you're trying to think of the word museum, and so you hesitate, right? And this is normal when you're learning a language. Repetition, usually it's like, hey teacher, I would like to talk about my trip. We repeat ourselves. It's kind of like getting yourself going. You're like, hey, I want to talk about I want to talk about my trip. So that's okay, but when students start repeating themselves a lot, are very hesitant when they're talking, in the grading, that's how we mark sometimes. You'll see a little like -1 or -2 points from your grade. Now, the next one you'll see there, right over here on the top, is conversation flow, the speed, and the cadence. Now, I, of course, speak fluent, so I speak very quickly. But I tell my students that they need to try to slow down and breathe. So during your tests, don't remember to breathe, try to relax, slow down a little bit. Now, kind of watch your speed. Now, if you talk really, really slow, like this, and your partner is listening to you, and you're going really slow, I'm going, okay, come on. And your partner's like, oh, come on, please talk a little faster. So a lot of times we do speed, and I don't do a lot of this, but if you're talking really, really fast, I might talk about that. Mumbling is when you don't speak clearly, and you mumble, you put your head down, and you're like, oh, teacher, I really think it's really good. And your partner's like, what? What? Now, if your partner's going like, what? What are you saying? Like, if your partner can't hear you and I can't hear you, you won't get a good grade, right? Because we want you to speak clearly. Not sounding memorized, which some students try to memorize a script, and it sounds like a robot, you know. You can tell that they're like looking up like, hello, I want to talk about my trip. My trip is very fun. I really want to talk about Spain. Spain is very fun. Ha ha ha. I like Spain. You can tell that they only memorized the script. Now, a little memorization is okay, but please don't try to memorize everything you're doing during your tests. Practice them, so you memorize them by practice them, but practice your fluency, okay? And what we really look at in this class a lot is communication. Now, body language, right? Now, a part of body language is sitting up straight, making eye contact. Please don't look down like this when you're talking. Don't look over here. Don't look over here. Don't look at your book when you're reading. You're supposed to be looking at your partner, right? Because it's a conversation. So try to focus on your camera or on your screen so you're actually looking at your partner. And saying things like, uh-huh, I see. Okay, uh-huh. All right. Nodding your head. We call that signaling, right? Asking questions is part of communication. I want you to ask questions of your partner, right? Interaction, when both you and your partner are talking and interacting, is part of communication. That's what we're going to focus on, is really taking the simple grammar and practicing your talking. And the more you practice, the more fluent you'll get. And then working on your communication skills, which we will talk about. Okay? So basically, what we're going to do now is look at a video. Our first test will be week 5. So if you're watching this is week 3. And then week 4, we're going to have some more Zoom sessions where on the first part of this, the last video, you have that homework where you're going to try to sell your phone to a partner. So we're going to break into groups so you can work on selling your phone using our language and using our communication. We're also going to talk about trips when you're going places and when you're traveling and explaining it using these descriptive words and superlatives and adjectives, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to page 133, and that's the page that we're going to use for our test. And on page 133 in your book, we're going to have you read these questions to your partner. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you a quick video I did a couple semesters ago that kind of explains what we're looking for on the test. Okay? So I will see you guys next week in our Zoom session. Remember, week 5 is going to be our first test. It'll be random with a partner. It means you'll be given a partner. And let me explain a little bit more now on what I'm looking for when you're taking the test. Okay? Let's look at that video. Here are the questions. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to ask these questions to your partner. These I will give you to you can practice. Okay? You're going to say, what's the best place to travel around? Now, what we're going to do here is this. Okay? You're going to pretend that your partner is not from Korea. They're non-Korean. They don't know about Korea. You're from your hometown, Seoul, Incheon, Busan. Your partner is going to ask you these questions. You can have the sheet. You can read them and ask them the questions. Your job is to go practice these answers. First one, was what's the best? I can't go back, but let me explain it. Non-Korean friend is visiting your hometown. Okay. Your partner will read the questions. They're in page 133. So I'll cover them in a minute, but page 133 in your book. Cha-cha, book 133. Their questions are right here. Okay? Your partner is going to read these to you. Now, partner, it's worth 5 points. One of you will make sure you keep eye contact. Don't look down and just read them. Look at the question, look at your partner in the Zoom, and ask the question. So if you keep looking down and reading like this the whole time, I will minus some points. Now, most of your points, 25, will be answering the questions. 1, if they ask a question like, what's the best way to travel around? Don't just go, bus. Is it the fastest? Yeah. Is it the cheapest? Yeah. If you just use yes or no or really short answers, I don't want that. Remember, say, oh yeah, the bus is definitely the fastest way. It's a great way. Don't remember your vocabulary like good and great and awesome and fantastic. So don't do that. Don't be short. Go home, write these things down. You have 2 weeks to practice your answers and practice your fluency. Look in the mirror and read your questions and practice them. Now, I don't want you to look at your thing and answer your questions. Just practice some questions, practice your fluency. Don't try to memorize everything, but make sure you memorize some of it so you can practice answering the questions. Now, give enough information. Again, don't say, yeah, it's a great place. Oh, yeah, that museum is awesome. Give some information, tell a story, communicate your message when you're answering the questions. So don't use yes or no. Make sure you practice your fluency beforehand and give some information. When your partner asks you the question, your job is to give them information. So let's look at those questions. Again, I will send them through your site. You will see a link. I'll probably do a PDF or a JPEG of these. If you have your book, they're page 133. Here's the questions. What's the best way to travel around? Is it the fastest and cheapest? Which part of town has the best nightlife? So if you go out at night, what's the best time to go out? Is it midnight or early? What's the most popular place for tourists to visit? Is it hiking or hunting or fishing or going dancing or going out to have chicken and beer? In your town, where's the best place to visit? One is like, what's kind of traditional food? Where should I try it? Like, where's the best restaurant? Where would be a nice day trip? Like, where would I go outside of the city? So like going out for a day. It's going to ask you about museums and what they can do in these museums. We're going to talk about what's the best time of year. Is it summer or winter or spring? These are the questions one of you will ask. Now, both of you will do it. One will ask the questions, the other will answer. When you're done, you're going to switch, and then one will ask questions, the other one will answer. You can rewatch this video. I will post the information online, and I'll also cover this during that other live session. Okay, so before we go, now remember, you're ending, week 3, you're ending this video. Don't forget to do your assignment. That's to write down those ideas for selling your phone, okay? So don't forget your assignment for week 3. Then in week 4, we'll go back to Zoom, okay? And in Zoom, we're going to practice the assignment of selling your phone. You're going to take those ideas and actually use them in class. I'll have you with different partners. We can practice using some of our grammar. We'll do a bunch of activities with your partners, okay? And then after week 4, Zoom is done. We'll come back in week 5 in Zoom, and that's when we're going to do our test. Now remember, test is from page 133. One of you will read it to your partner. The other partner is going to answer the questions, okay? When you're done, then you're going to switch, and then your partner will read the questions to you, and you will answer it. So that's our test for week 5, and I'll just give you some random partners because you should be able to have this test pretty easily. Now, if you need some more practice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload, okay, so on the LMS, okay. So what I'll do is I'll upload during that week 3 this little JPEG, and what you can do is look over it, and these are just some questions asking you questions about your hometown. Remember, your test is about your hometown. Now on page 133, those are the questions your partner will be asking you. But to get ready, you can go on and look at some of these questions. It talks about where your city is and how far it is from the capital. Talks about, is it a big town or small town? It gives you some ideas of like churches or museums or theaters, places you could go. It talks about the public transportation, where you can go shopping, if there's any festivals. So read over this, okay? Pick some of these, and then during your test, maybe you could explain or expound or explain further. So maybe there's like a big festival, and they're asking about like a day trip. Maybe if you drove to the next city, there's a big festival. You could talk about that during your test, okay? So just remember, this is just for you to go over it, and you're gonna bring this to your class when you come back for week 4. So next week, don't forget to do your assignment. Also, download this JPEG